Plus, to be a part of your day, Kevin Miller in the morning on KIDO Talk Radio. Thank you all for joining us. We go live to our Newsmaker line. Brian Crabtree joins us from Talk40.com. Brian, good morning.
Good morning.
So, a week after the president announces the tariffs, he intends to continue on with that. The usual suspects have issues with it. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think it's the usual suspects always are emotional basket cases when it comes to Trump especially. I don't think tariffs are necessarily good or bad. I think we have to watch it play out, and I think Americans would be well advised to do this on a number of issues with the president. He's a smart guy, contrary to popular belief or opinion, and I think he kind of knows what he's doing. Part of negotiating is to sometimes make situations worse, but controlling those situations so that you can eventually make them better. You have to break things down sometimes, just like when you're renovating a house, you tear things out so that you can put new things in. So sometimes the house gets worse before it gets better. I think it's the same thing with this sort of economic policy. I don't think he intends to start a trade war. He's not opposed to it. But I think what he's trying to do is bring people to the table feeling that they better get something done so that he can negotiate better deals for America. Now, that could work out or it could blow up in his face, but I think it's a risk worth taking.
Indeed. Brian Crabtree joining us here at Talk40.com. Brian, let's talk a little bit about the House Intelligence Committee talking about the idea that there's no Russian collusion. Does this end everything?
Well, certainly not. I mean, it's the headlines on it say Republicans in the House, so that by its nature is already the media has already given Democrats cover to be able to say this is just the Republican version of it, covering for the president. They're not really being fully with justice in mind, if you will. They're just basically covering for the president, trying to make everything look good. And so I think this is just going to be another political football, and it doesn't really help the president in terms of clearing, those moderates in America that seem to waver kind of back and forth on this president. I think it still leaves them in the question mark category until something meaningful comes out. That's sort of the sad state of affairs. It's guilty until proven innocent at the presidential level, and apparently at a lot of other levels when it comes to our main cultural discussion and discourse, whether it be the Me Too movement or politics. People are not willing to let the facts vet out reality any longer. They immediately assume their own reality, and that's sort of what's happened in this Russian investigation.
Are we making too much of this Pennsylvania 18? Do you think?
Well, I think yes. We made too much of District 6 here in Georgia, and at that time you could argue that Trump was in worse shape politically than he is now. He's had some successes since then. His approval numbers in some polls are touching 50%. Others, they're below 40. But now President Trump seems to have a bit of a swagger that he didn't have during Georgia's District 6. They spent about $35 million, the Democrats, in order to attempt to win that. Now, they closed the gap from 14 points that Tom Price, who became Health and Human Services Secretary, he had been the congressman there. He won by 14 points in 2016. The winner, the Republican Karen Handel, won by 4 or 5 points. And so they did close the gap some, but for $35 million in a market even the size of Atlanta, I would hope you could win with that kind of money, but apparently you couldn't buy the voters. When it comes to this, listen, you may have a situation where Democrats win in Pennsylvania. That is a wake-up call to Republicans because this is a district that Trump won by quite a wide margin. So if they lose there, then there's some problems structurally with the Republican Party that can be fixed before the real midterms this year. But I would say this, Democrats are blowing their wad. They're spending all they've got, everything they can find to paint a narrative that Trump's in trouble. And just painting that narrative isn't necessarily a good thing for Democrats because it serves to wake up Republicans. Instead, they might have been better to have put a normal effort forward in these races like District 6 and Pennsylvania 18 so that they could blindside Republicans come November. They seem to be doing the opposite, and if they go into the November midterms with 20 Senate seats and a host of other House seats that are critical to win, they may not have the money and resources. I mean, that's the real reality of the Democrat Party right now because of their spending in races like this.
Brian Crabtree joining us on KIDO Talk Radio from Talk40.com. Brian, How do you see the midterms going as we take a look at this? I mean, historically, it hasn't been good for the first 2 years of the presidency, of a new presidency. The midterms usually go the other way. That seems to be what the Democrats are counting on.
Well, yeah, this race today in Pennsylvania is going to be indicative of sort of how to answer that question. So I would say that if tonight the Trump side, which is the Republican in Pennsylvania 18, wins by a decent margin, that'll be another surprise victory. The latest poll by Monmouth puts Lamb, the younger Democrat opponent, puts him at about 6 points ahead. So if that turns out to be true, the polls are indicative, then that means that you've got an apathy that's built again by Republicans. Remember, the reason Trump won is because a host of people, millions of people, who had never voted before or who felt forgotten and left out and hadn't voted for the last 2 or 3 presidents, who were typical Republican voters or conservative voters, they were fired up by Trump and came out in droves. And basically, you had a Democrat Party with a candidate that generally they weren't that fired up about. So I don't see anything here where there's a bunch of Democrat fire and fury behind these candidates. It appears to me if there is a loss tonight in Pennsylvania and the Democrats win, that it'll be more about the apathy of Republican voters, which has long been the problem with conservative politics.
Well, we go back to this Pennsylvania race. It's interesting. They have a veteran, a semi-young guy, trying to be a populist, what have you, the old blue dog Democrats. Yet let's be honest, the Democrats still have a problem, Brian, because it's all identity politics at the national level. So even if this guy wins, he's not going to really be truly welcome in the Democratic Party, or will he?
Yeah, and I don't think you will, and I think that eventually you're going to see the same thing play out with Doug Jones over in the Alabama Senate. It's just there's just no way to go there and play into the swamp of politics of D.C. and be anything but what the national party tells you to be, especially as Democrats. I mean, look at Dianne Feinstein. I can't believe I'm about to say this, but she's one of the more reasonable Democrats in the Senate, and she's fighting for her life to keep her Senate seat. So she's more moderate, which is still far to the left compared to where they used to be. And she's not even being tolerated by Democrats in her reelection. And she's been there quite a while, has quite a host of accomplishments, especially in the Democratic ranks. But that's not good enough. So the Democrat Party has a real problem structurally in being able to accept different points of view. Republicans may argue, but there's 2 or 3 Republican parties inside the Republican Party. That's both a strength and a weakness. But when it comes to being so far to the right or so far to the left, it becomes a strength if you can tolerate moderates, because that's really where the country is moderate and maybe slightly to the right. The issue right now is I just think there's so much clutter that's negative Trump from the media and from the political class of D.C., which would include even some former Republicans, I guess, at this point, that it's very hard for the American people to really figure out how to vote and whether to support Trump or not. They feel like they're not supposed to support Trump, and that's a real psychological barrier, I think, for a lot of people, and I think to some extent that's at play in Pennsylvania.
Brian, what else should we be looking out for this week?
Well, I think, I've been on the social site Quora lately, where they ask questions and people give answers, and I've thrown up a couple of questions. And one of them is that I most recently threw up was, what would it take in terms of economic achievement or success by this country under Trump for you guys that don't like him to finally turn the corner? And the answers start to strike me as sort of very telling in that they're worried about nepotism of Ivanka and Jared, and they're worried about what he may gain personally from it. And I told one guy this morning, I said, that's not the question. The question was, what would it take? And a lot of people aren't willing to identify a level of success that really would make a difference for them in their mind. Maybe I've been wrong about this. Now, some people will. I think we should be looking to the issues that really are like that one. We've got a lot of people in this country that are actually betting on failure, and we can't be watching the mainstream media in terms of cable news and some of these newspapers and really taking any cues at all. And I think we have to look toward everything we read and hear and see and think, maybe this is a lie. Maybe this is wrong. Maybe there's an agenda behind this. And if it's going to affect my decisions on anything I do, whether it be a business decision or political decision, I've really got to stop and do some more research, or I've got to tune it out completely. And that's both healthy and dangerous. But that's kind of where we find ourselves at this point in time, is that I'm really disgusted by watching the spectacle of the American people not recognizing that strength is what we need, resolve is what we need, and business policy is what we need to build this country back again to a strong country where everyone can succeed. And we're wallowing in the slop of our judgments individually as if though we're sanctimonious in essence of other people such as Trump. We got to stop that. That's really, I think that's the focus the country and your listeners ought to have is how to get to the truth and avoid all of this clutter and unnecessary garbage that's being vomited on us every day.
I think we could start by tuning out The View.
Yeah, no kidding. My mother watches that, and I ask her, she's a Trump supporter. Why can't? First of all, how? But then why can you watch that? And she says, I think it's funny watching people that stupid argue about stuff they know nothing about. So I guess in the wisdom of my mother, she finds it quite comical and entertaining to watch the zoo animals act like zoo animals on The View.
Brian Crabtree, Talk40.com. Thank you, sir.
Great to be with you.
All right, there we have it. I love that. His mom watches The View. Shout out to all the moms this morning. Coming up next, Mike Pence speaks about Christianity. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. It's a blessing to be with you. Coming up, a story we can't ignore, but before that, we need some inspiration here. And let's hear from our great Vice President, Mike Pence.
You and I know that criticism comes with public life, but I felt it was important that I defend the faith of tens of millions of Americans against that kind of slander. And I did so. And, I give Joy Behar a lot of credit. She picked up the phone. She called me. She was very sincere. And she apologized. And one of the things my faith teaches me is grace. Forgive as you've been forgiven.
So does mine, but I'm not as good at it as you.
Well, look, but I said to Joy, of course I forgive you. That's part of my faith experience. But I did encourage her, and I'm still encouraging her, to use the forum of that program or some other public forum to apologize to tens of millions of Americans who were equally offended.
In other words, Joy Behar ripping Mike Pence, calling Christians mentally deranged or mentally ill. ABC is continuing to get the fallout from that. And Ray, you remember the Republican lady we were supposed to have on yesterday? The RNC spokesman? Yeah, right. Well, she was on Fox this morning, so it was funny because I guess she could get up early for Fox, but not for this program. But I thought you'd find that funny. I just rolling along this morning. So we'll do our very best to get the same folks that you see on and hear about on Fox and Friends. And sometimes they show up, sometimes they don't. But it was funny. Maybe, as Ray told me off the air, it was the time change. But anyway, a story that, unfortunately, I'm sure will be going national from our news partners, Channel 7. And remember, when you see Channel 7, you're listening and watching the news partners of KIDO Talk Radio. And this is from our friends in East Idaho at East Idaho News. A junior high school teacher is under investigation after he fed a puppy to a snapping turtle in front of students. Now, it's funny, the Statesman isn't going with the name and doesn't say what actually happened, but we'll go with the East Idaho News. They do a good job over there, and Channel 7's picking it up. I trust the source. Robert Crossland has taught science at Preston Junior High School for years. In a news release, Preston School District 201 Superintendent Mark Gee said his administration became aware of a regrettable circumstance involving some of the biological specimens on March 7th. Well, we could read the story, but what type of idiot, what type of moron, what type of scientist would do this? Really? What type of school district would not fire this guy immediately? Yes, presumption of innocence, litigate the process. But if we're admitting this right now, and from the news release, The event occurred well after students had been dismissed and was not part of a school-directed activity. We emphasize that at no time was the safety of students or staff compromised. So that has nothing to do with it. Look, educators have a tough enough time as it is. We've got bond levies going on today. We'll get your calls on that at 580-5436. 580-KIDO. We're not going to hyperventilate. We're not going to scream. We're not even going to laugh about this. This is unacceptable behavior if this happened. And according to the news release, it did. This is unacceptable behavior in America, in any country of the world. What type of person would do this? And then the Rudy Poo School District's defense that it didn't happen during the school, that kids weren't endangered. What rationale is this? This man should be fired and should never teach again, if in fact the story is correct. And if in fact the story is correct, there should be some type of animal cruelty charges, in my personal opinion. Now, it is unclear if the dog was alive or dead when Crossland fed it to the turtle. Although it happened after school hours, some students did witness the feeding. Administrators began investigating the incident immediately, according to Gee, and the Franklin County Sheriff's Office was contacted. Crossland has not been cited or charged and has not been placed on leave. So in other words, they're fine with Crossland being there. That is not good for that school district. Now, they're not in our listening area, but as part of any investigation, including the best course of action once the facts of the matter have been ascertained, this is not an easy situation, well, or can be taken lightly. To me, you're taking it lightly. This guy should be suspended pending the outcome of the investigation. At 580-5436, 580-KIDO. More on Mr. Crossland in a minute. First, traffic and weather. Now, again, we're talking about this story out of Preston, Idaho, where, according to East Idaho News and Channel 7, a teacher has fed a puppy to a snapping turtle in front of students. And we're talking about Robert Crossland of Preston Junior High. He's been there for years. It continues on. Crossland is a popular teacher who has exotic snakes and other animals in tanks around his classroom. He's a cool teacher who really brought science to life, a former student says. I loved his class because he had turtles and snakes and other cool things. 3 former students who asked not to be named said they recall Crossland feeding guinea pigs to snakes and snapping turtles during classroom demonstrations. I guess all in the name of science. Gee, the superintendent, said the district is taking steps to ensure this type of action could not be repeated and asked for patience within the investigation. Blah, blah, blah. Instances will not cause us to forget the years of care, effort, and passion the teacher has given his students. Apparently, they don't want to get rid of Mr. Crossland. Innocent till proven guilty, but if he is guilty, would you want this guy teaching your kids? Well, one little thing should not. Look, I wouldn't want this person in a classroom. There's a difference between a guinea pig or any type of life and a live puppy or a dead puppy. What benefit is it of that? You know, sometimes we have to check ourselves. Fortunately, I have a lot of people that keep me in line. Mrs. Miller, Jeff the Suit, Tea Party Bob, Terry from State College, Pennsylvania, Cindy, Liberty Linda, the list goes on, Security Guard Mike. But why in the world would, I mean, if you were coming home and your middle school kid, which is what, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, hey, Mr. Miller just did this, what would your reaction be? I would be on the phone to the superintendent, the principal, and saying this isn't acceptable. And despite your years of service, you don't do that. You don't do that in front of students. You don't do that with snapping turtles. I'm sorry. That's why we have computer programs. 580-5436, 580-KIDO. You know, again, does this represent your thoughts of education? I love how the Preston School District said this, the regrettable circumstances, but it happened after school hours. It should be okay. Well, is it okay with you? 580-5436, 580-KIDO. You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Maggie.
Good.
And live to New York for Tanya J. Powers of Fox News Radio. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, a warning out from the FCC, neighbor spoofing. What's that about?
This is, and you may have noticed this, or your listeners may have noticed this in recent weeks especially. You get a phone call from a number that looks like it's a local number, and you pick it up and there's nobody on the other end, or it's a robocall or something like that. This is called neighbor spoofing. And what this is these scammers who sometimes are operating from overseas, but you'd never know it, because what they do is use technology to manipulate the phone number where it looks like they're calling from to where it looks like it's a local number for you. And it could have the same area code and the same first three digits of your own phone number, which means that when it pops up, a lot of us will go, oh, well, that looks like it's somebody that obviously knows me. It's a local call, and you'll answer it. A lot of times there will be just dead air on the other end. Nobody will say anything. But what they're doing is they're establishing the number that they've called, your number, as being an active line. So they, you go on a list and, you are a target for future scammers because they know that there's an actual person on the other end of that phone line.
It's interesting. I do get a lot of calls. My area code is 615, and I get a ton of calls from there. And it's 208 in Idaho, but, my heart belongs to the South, as you know, young lady.
I do. Yes, and it's interesting because this has been happening to me for weeks, months, actually. You get a phone call, and it has the same area code, same first three digits. A lot of times it'll have maybe one of the next four digits of your phone number. I mean, they get really close. And what the FCC, they're putting out a warning. Also, the BBB has put out a warning about this, and they're saying, look, if it's a number that you don't know, don't answer it. And,
I was just going to ask you, I mean, if I don't really recognize a number, I don't answer it for some strange. I don't. Do you answer pretty much?
No.
Yeah.
No, if it's not a number that I know, I don't answer it. I mean, and the FCC says that's the way that is best, to combat this. Because if it's important, they'll leave a message. Most of us have, voicemail at this point. If it's somebody that, and most of us also can be reached in another way. I mean, like some people might text you, people might contact you on Facebook, things like that. Usually if they don't leave a message, there's another way that they can reach you. It kind of goes against what I think most of us automatically think, which is, oh, well, somebody might need me. I should probably answer this. But what it's doing, like I said, is trying to see if that's an active number. And this is also something that we need to make sure and remind people, especially our mom and dad, our grandparents, even our teenagers, because they make it the same. It's no respecter of age. This can happen to anybody. And remember, if you get a call from a scammer or anybody that says, because they're not going to call up and go, hi, I'm trying to scam you, they're going to sound like they're legit. And if they're asking for any personal information, any kind of, especially any bank or credit card information, if they're threatening you with, we're going to overtake your computer and you're going to have to pay us this much money and blah, 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 hang up. This is a scammer. This is somebody who is trying to part you with your personal information that can be used against you or your money. That is the thing to always remember with all of this is anytime you get somebody that calls you up and asks you for something like that, hang up.
Great information, Tanya J. Powers. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Anytime.
All right, our great friend Tanya J. Powers from Fox News Radio. Remember, when you hear Fox News on the radio, you're listening to KIDO Talk Radio here in the Treasure Valley.
Butch Otter signed House Bill 463, the $200 million income tax bill, into law. The bill reduces Idaho income tax rates by nearly half a percentage point and adds a $130 child tax.
Ooh, half a percentage point. Impressive.
Tax credit rate. That new child tax credit rate will partly offset a change in federal tax laws, which eliminated an exemption for dependents. The estimated tax relief is around $200 million statewide. Lawmakers also estimate that it would reduce revenue to the general fund by more than $100 million.
This is exciting. We've gone 5 years without any significant tax relief, and yet we have seen some significant increases in our revenues for the state. We're doing some good things. In the meantime, we have been able to increase greatly our funding for public education, which was a top priority for the governor and for many of us in the legislature. We have been able to replenish our reserve funds, which was also important so we can prepare for the next turn down. But in the meantime, we've got some tax revenues that we need to return to the people who paid those tax revenues.
Yeah, that sounds good. And certainly the people that back the governor are thinking this is great, but really a 0.5%? Is anybody going to really miss that? I mean, a 0.5%? And look, maybe I'm being too tough on the state government, right? Because we have a lot of oversight of state government here at 580-5436. 580-KIDO. Look, the governor, he's a smart guy, a charismatic guy. He's been elected 3 times, been involved in politics almost longer than I've been alive. But that still doesn't mean that he and his acolytes are right in the state legislature. Clearly, I think that most folks would have wanted the grocery tax repeal to go through. And clearly this has been, it depends on what type of media you listen to. You listen to the fake news, and there is fake news in Idaho where people say, oh, isn't this good? And you read from the press release, and you're a good boy. Or you hang out with us, and we give you the real news, the real talk, which doesn't come from political pontification or the politicians. It comes from you. It's a revolution we hope to expand here in the state of Idaho, but if not, we hopefully will be able to stay here in the Treasure Valley because folks are uncomfortable with getting the real news, the real talk. And the reason why I say that is you can have people say, hey, what'd you think of this? Blah, 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 blah. And that's good. Or you can look at something from a critical thinking point of view and say, well, do you really believe when, the senator says Idahoans deserve some relief, 0.5%, that's a good thing? In my opinion, and I'd love to get yours at 580-5436, my opinion is this is just to simply say when these folks run for re-election or run for higher office, look, we cut taxes. No, you didn't. You didn't repeal the grocery tax, which is what the people really wanted. And you're not going to hear that anywhere else. The people wanted a repeal of the grocery tax. We heard from Mike Moyle on the House floor that the governor was not going to sign that. The governor runs the legislature. Otter's last hurrah. Simply how it is. We heard from, Leiter? That the governor wasn't in favor of the CBD oil. Behind closed doors, broke Senate rules, House rules, sunshine rules, state laws. Embarrassing. The governor running the legislature. That era ends. And basically, $200 million. Are any of us going to see this? Maybe people with kids. And if you have kids, I hope you get a healthy tax credit. But you can't tell me that you can give a $200 million allegedly tax break and not afford a repeal of the grocery tax and increase funding in education. If education funding is so increased, why are we having so many levies today? I mean, are you happy to be paying for more and more school building? Should that be the local communities or should that be the state? I mean, think about all the levies that are being voted on today. And again, it's as if state government has, passed the buck. Ada County, West Ada, supplemental levy, $14 million to keep the lights on, right? I don't really get it. I don't get it at all. What is this general obligation bond? What is that, $95 million? $14 million supplemental levy. It goes on and on. Canyon County, Caldwell School District, $2.5 million for two years. General obligation fund for the Middleton School District, $25 million to build a new elementary school. Parma, $5 million. So at 580-5436, 580-KIDO, The governor hails this, and his folks hail this as a great thing. Yeah, if you don't get the real news, if you don't get the real talk. That's what we have built our franchise here on. I hope it works. But if not, I'll be at the flower shop at 580-5436-580-KIDO. And I don't kid around when I say that. That's what's at stake here. That's exactly what's at stake. That's why I always say, look, we need you to help us continue to expand the listenership of this program, because we're being evaluated all the time. I go back to this, though, and I think, are you excited about this alleged $200 million? I don't think it's hitting everybody. But you know something? Just shut up and listen to what the governor has to say. And like I've said for years, the governor is a very accomplished young man. He can come on this program anytime he or his staff or both choose not to. And they don't want to face the real news, the real talk. And we'll hear from Cindy and Hank next with Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Kevin Miller in the morning. We go to Cindy in Caldwell. Good morning, Cindy.
Good morning, Kevin. Kevin, you are brilliant. I can't believe what you talk about. I'm walking around the kitchen just shaking my head. I will tell you, when I taught first grade, when they would bring, my kids sometimes would bring like an ant or a worm into class, and I would just be saying, let's just look at it and let's just put it back out in nature. So seriously, one about the turtle or about whatever gets fed to turtles around the world. I'm in the mission field. People are literally eating the most interesting items, including dogs. So I don't know really what happened with the science teacher. I only know that personally, the way I feel about snakes, I would not even be in that class. And my concern more is that they're teaching instead of intelligent design, Darwinian science and every other gosh darn thing in the government schools. So that's said about that. But I really liked what your friend Tanya was talking about, and I was just laughing because I actually use a land phone, and I have a smartphone and a track phone, but I answer all my calls. I don't even have caller ID, but I'm sort of much more in sharing my faith, like our vice president. If you call my house, and I really don't care, you talk to me, I probably will be telling you something about my Jesus, and it's hysterical with people because I say, well, you called me, so I guess you do need to know that, especially in this season, how much God loves us and his son as an atoning sacrifice. And you better figure out where you're going when this life is over. So we have a lot of chit-chats on the phone. I do with all kinds of people that call here. So not a problem about that. And as far as the school bond, my answer is for me, no. I had a talk with the superintendent, and I said, really? You need a new kitchen? How about like they used to do? I packed a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and ate an apple, and, everybody was good to go. So I just think it's pretty sad for people like you and taxpayers that are out there. I have a friend already that with the taxes in Caldwell and with what happened, he was kind of funny. He said, maybe I should have just stayed in California. But I really do, because if you can't figure out how to balance your budget within a school system and that sacred cow of education, heaven forbid if someone even like Raul Lavador or Scott Seimer, somebody even says, let's look at the money where it's going within those and let's see how we can better manage what we have instead of creating for this taxpayers who are paying for, all kinds of I won't just say people, let's just say parents. I'm not picking on that part, but people choose alternative schools. There are people in there that pay very little taxes. And
right.
So I'm just saying, I really feel bad for you guys, but Kevin, your show is brilliant. You went from like 3 different things, yeah. So you have a great day, Kevin. You stay with it. And until you find out the facts with the poor science teacher, I don't know what he was doing.
Oh, I think we know. I'm just going above and beyond, but he should be fired. He should be charged. He's got to go.
Kevin.
You don't feed puppies to turtles.
Well, you don't take bags from Planned Parenthood and go throw them in the garbage and little babies either. So I have less of a problem with that than our representatives that keep voting that institution, because you walk in one day and ask them, I don't say, that to me, what
Right.
we get our righteous indignation all upset about is one thing, but walk into one of those places one day and go see what happens. And
Cindy?
I'll just leave it at that. So I don't know about the turtle deal.
All right,
But
Cindy.
anyway,
Thank you.
great day.
All
Bye.
right. Bye-bye. Traffic and weather. And let's go to Hank in Boise at KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Hank.
Good morning. Well, we still got another 293 days before we can clean the manure out of the governor's office. We have to steam clean the place out by the time we get through. But at any rate, you talk about wasting money, and he's claiming he's got to have every cent. $1.5 million on the Pam Lowell settlement. When he didn't want it, when he wanted to violate the law in terms of giving the lowest bidder on highway contracts. Another $2.5 million on the Syringa broadband Quest scam, where he wanted to basically pay off a political supporter, this time Quest. Losses of money and settlements involving
Hank, apparently Rex Tillerson has been fired, and Mike Pompeo will be the new Secretary of State. Breaking news here.
I'm kind of tell you the truth. I'm kind of favoring the change and change in some ways. I don't think that. I think that Tillerson. He could have gotten a better choice than Tillerson. That's just my personal opinion.
This from Donald Trump. He just tweeted this out. Mike Pompeo will be the director, become the new Secretary of State. He will do a fantastic job. Thank you, Rex Tillerson, for his service. Gina Haspel will become the new director of the CIA, the first woman so chosen. Congrats to all. So Donald Trump has just fired Tillerson.
Yeah, he's kind of the only administration where you have sudden firings that I remember. I've studied presidential administration stuff. You go back to Harry Truman, where he basically was firing people right and left, whether it was Henry Wallace or a number of people in there, and where there was a lot of changeover and whatnot. In a lot of ways, there's some aspects of Trump's style that reminds me of Harry Truman in some ways. But
Tillerson was a good boy.
Yeah, but he's I always felt Tillerson was establishment all the way, and I thought it was an odd choice. But that's just my 2 bits into it. But getting back to it all, you got this Hewlett-Packard scam, which if we finally probably dig down deep enough, there's probably another political payola in that. And time to get the asbestos out and time to reinvent the vendor, I think your price tag's going to be well over $200 million on that. And by the way, his political activity dates all the way back to the 60s when he was in the College Republicans. That's how far back Butch goes in terms of active politics. And then, of course, his first run for the House, which was in 1972.
Great point, Hank. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning.